listening to the Rapport Podcast Network.
Well, week 9 is complete. Our game against the Ole Miss Rebels is complete. And you know what? The Sooners go down with another loss. It's a tough one to take in. Went just about exactly how I think we anticipated it going. I didn't think that the Sooners would put up as much of a fight as they did, but they did. We'll talk about all of it here, much more on our post-game reaction show here on the Sooner Spotlight. Sooner Nation, welcome into another episode of the Sooner Spotlight, a dark and gloomy Sooner Spotlight episode for sure. And it's been this way for 3 straight weeks now, and 4 times now this season. It's just honestly something that as Sooner fans, we're not used to being in this dark of a hole, even though we saw where it could have happened earlier in the season. Preseason, a lot of people were projecting this, but I will say this. So Oklahoma is basically on the trajectory of where a lot of teams thought, or a lot of people, a lot of media personnel thought that Oklahoma would be, but it's not quite for the reasons that they thought it might be. And in some ways, very much so, the reasons that they thought it might be. But first off, welcome in everybody. If you would, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can check out everything that we do over at Soonerspotlight.com. You can check out the merch store over there to support us directly. We've got things like this hat and so much more. Maybe not the best time to be advertising for Sooner merch, but hey, you know what? Maybe we get some softball stuff out there, some basketball stuff out there, and start to get that rolling too. That way we can at least maybe redirect some of our attention just to kind of take us away from this dark, gloomy spot. But we're going to get into it, talk about the game against the Ole Miss Rebels. It was a tough game to watch, and honestly, looking at that second half, you would have thought that it was a much worse game than what it was. 26-14. My projection was 28-17. Here on the show just yesterday, so just before the game. And so, it wasn't that far off. It just didn't happen exactly the way that I thought it would. We came out and we looked very good in the first half. The first drive of the game, we saw the offense marching down the field, and everyone got excited about that. I did think that, really the only bad play call that I can really pick out off the top of my mind in the entire game, really, I don't know that I can really pick out very many. I know that there was a 3rd and 13 that I wish we would have passed the ball instead of just a quick and easy run. I think there was a tight end screen that maybe wasn't a good call, but it's probably more with hindsight knowing how it ended up. But the only one call that I didn't like on offense was the passing play that we had on 4th and goal. I think that was from the 2-3 yard line, something like that, where for one, I wouldn't have minded us running the ball there when the running game seemed to be doing just fine. And honestly, we even got the inside zone working yesterday quite a few times. And not just with Taylor Tatum. We got that working with Javonte Barnes. So, I wish we would have ran the ball there. But even if we did pass the ball, I didn't like the QB power fake wasn't necessarily what I didn't like about that play. It was that we had 2 receivers, and I think that caused a little bit of confusion for both receivers, where we had Bauer Sharp miss the ball, and then I believe it was Brennan Thompson, if memory serves me correctly, that just couldn't quite make the catch. But I think as a receiver, you see that going, and you see Bauer Sharp in front of you, it does throw you for a loop. He's got to make that catch. Sure, you can throw that in there, and you can push the blame wherever you want. That was the only play call that I really didn't like. I didn't understand why there was 2 routes right on top of each other there. That's the only play call that I saw that I just really didn't like all game long. There was some others that, like I said, maybe wouldn't have called it that way myself, but I can understand why the play call was made where it was. Let's start off with the first half and look at some of my first half notes. If you followed me on Twitter, which go ahead and follow me over on Twitter, that's at Real Josh Mahler. You can follow me over there, and that link is down in the description as well. But if you follow me there, you saw this at halftime. I said, hey, first half notes and a lot of positives. We're winning. We're up 14-10. A beautiful, really long drive. I believe, what was that, 92 yards? A really long drive to close out the half. and it was executed to perfection. And they put the ball in the end zone. The offensive line caved in a couple of times, and Jackson Arnold found a way to roll out and find something and get something going. That was a huge plus side. So my first half notes, Javonte Barnes had 50 yards at the half, 50 yards rushing. I like to see that. 50 yards in one half. I mean, that means he's on pace to get over that 80-yard mark that we've been talking about all season long, that we just need one rusher, one running back to get over 50 yards, and I don't think he hardly touched the rock at all in the second half. That's a huge problem. I suppose that comes down to offensive scheme. Maybe that's offensive play calling, missing it a little bit there, but at the same time, I think the way that the game was going very quickly in the third quarter is the reason why we didn't run the ball as much. So I'm not totally putting anything there. Jackson Arnold threw 77% for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. He was 10 for 13, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, 44 rushing yards. I loved what I saw from Jackson Arnold in the first half. That was really great play, gritty play from the guy that could have just redshirted and transferred out of here, the way that Oklahoma kind of treated him. Oklahoma fans treated him pretty poorly. You can feel disrespected by the coaching staff when you're benched, and in today's college football, that's just what happens. So he could have redshirted before last game, and instead he said, no, I'll step in and try to help my team. We're in a bad position, and I want to help him. And now it seems like that he might be sticking around, and that means, maybe our decisions are boiled down to only keeping one of these two quarterbacks, which is not what I want to see happen. But that's kind of where we're at. And I think a lot of Sooner fans are finally realizing why some people like myself were defending Jackson Arnold, that I don't think he ever should have been benched as a starter. I think he should have always been the starter. But Jackson Arnold threw 77% in the first half, looked really good in the first half, 110 yards in the first half, which is as much as he's had in some games. So, that was something that we all loved in the first half. One criticism that I had, not necessarily of Jackson Arnold, I think a lot of it was the playbook, but you can't change that up too much. And so I'm not totally blaming Joe John Finley and Kevin Johns for the playbook and the way that the playbook was set up, but I only saw maybe 3 wide receivers out there most of the time, maybe a 4th with a tight end. But I don't know, it just felt like we didn't have a lot of options to go to, and it seemed like the same wide receivers out there constantly. I saw J.J. Hester, Brendan Thompson, and then we had Jacob Jordan, and those were the only 3 players that were out there. And so only 3 players in the first half caught the ball. And let me double check real quick just to pull this up as far as players who caught the ball. So receivers, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players who caught the ball. There was, only 2. 2 of them were wide receivers. So we had J.J. Hester and Jacob Jordan were the only 2 wide receivers to catch the ball. Brendan Thompson couldn't pull anything in. It wasn't really targeted towards him very much, so that's something. And then we had 3 fumbles. I think we only lost 1 of them. It wasn't a good game. Even in that first half with all the bright sides going, it wasn't that great. The first half, again, the defense, going over to the defensive side of the ball, the defense only allowed 10 points and only allowed 43 rushing yards. I couldn't have been more happy with the way that the first half went. Oklahoma's offense was 7 for 9 on 3rd down conversions in the first half. I mean, everything that we were seeing from that first half felt like Seth Luttrell was the problem, and we got rid of him, and now look, we've got this new life in the offense, and that just seemed to be the case. And obviously, it wasn't quite the case. I do think that getting rid of Seth Luttrell and mixing some things up helped this offense find a little bit of a rhythm. We were able to run pretty well. I believe Javonte Barnes only touched the ball 3 or 4 times in the second half. That was one thing that I didn't like. Taylor Tatum, as amazing as that guy is, we've got to find a way to make sure that he's not fumbling the ball. It feels like he's fumbled the ball too much, and honestly, he hasn't even fumbled the ball that much this season. But it feels like he's fumbled the ball a lot this season, and That's something that has to be changed for sure. That's something that, I mean, with a running back with as much talent as he has, you would really hope that he's not fumbling the ball, and he fumbled the ball in a really bad spot yesterday, and it ended up working out for us with a double fumble recovery, and then of course the offensive line breaks, and Jackson Arnold fumbles it, which again, I don't really blame Jackson Arnold. Even the commentators were pretty good about pointing that out. Jackson Arnold was in a pretty tough spot there, not having enough time to even pull the ball in to secure it before he's getting hit. And yeah, I mean, it was just, overall, that offensive line is why Oklahoma lost yesterday. The offensive line is why Oklahoma lost. And you know what? As often as I heard, put the freshmen in. Put the freshmen in the game and let the freshmen block. Let the freshman linemen get in there and get some experience. I didn't agree with that for so long because we've got some freshmen that I think have a high ceiling on the offensive line, that you don't want them going in and burning that redshirt year if it's not necessary. Because this year they've got time to kind of get a little bit of a chemistry going with each other, and moving forward, we've got an offensive line that looks much better if we're able to keep those freshmen off the field. Now, we only have 4 games left. 4 games left. You don't have to burn a red shirt now. You can throw those freshmen in. I'm all for it now. Now we can explore every bit of it, because we've got to come away with 2 wins. And I don't know exactly where those 2 wins are going to be. If we couldn't pull out the win here against Ole Miss, the way that this fell apart in the second half, winning 14-10 at halftime, and then we go down 16-0 in the second half alone, it was a pathetic second half. And you know what? It's really tough for Oklahoma fans to keep on building up and trying to try to keep on going with this and have any kind of hope, because we're so used to winning. We're so used to, hey, we've still got a little bit of a contention for a championship, maybe a conference championship. We've got a little bit of a contention for a national championship. That's not the case this year. So you're starting to see Oklahoma fans getting very upset. And here's one thing that I've got to say about this. So I saw a lot of comments about, are you even on the team? What does it matter to you? As Oklahoma fans, we are a part of the team. As a football fan, as a fan of a sports team, you are a part of that team. That's kind of what it means to be a fanatic, to be a fan of that team. It's a way for you to feel a part of the team without actually being a part of the team. So that's why we say we didn't perform good yesterday. That's why we say we played Ole Miss yesterday and we lost yesterday, is because we feel a part of the team. No, technically we're not a part of the team. But when people ask that, when people get so upset about, well, I don't know why you're getting upset about the game, it's just a dumb game, that's part of being a fan. It's part of the reason why we don't understand why we put ourselves through this for 5 or 6 months of the year. And for some of us, many more months than that, really 12 months a year, because we're constantly supporting other teams. We're supporting other sports. Maybe we're personally, I'm a pretty big hockey fan. I like to watch hockey. I'm not super devoted into hockey the way I am to college football, but I still like hockey. I like basketball. I like baseball and softball. So I'm sitting right there bouncing all year round, supporting these different teams. So we do this to ourselves, but we're a part of this team, right? And we are. When you become a fan of a team and you become a true diehard fan of a team, you are a part of that team. So I hate hearing that narrative as if you're not a part of the team. Why does it matter to you? No, we are. And that's why we get upset about losses like this. Let's jump to overall notes of the game real quick. Just final thoughts. First, starting off, we already kind of mentioned it by talking about the first half. We saw some life on offense. We did. If we take away that second half, we feel really good about what the offense did. I mean, they went against a very good defensive front, and the offensive line looked really good until Jacob Sexton had to come out for an injury. So that's what we feel about this offense. We saw some life. The play calling seemed to be doing much better. It was much more basic. We did have a couple of little trick plays in there that I don't know what the point of that was. And I don't think we executed some plays very well, like the tight end screen that we ran. I brought that up just a minute ago. We didn't really execute in certain play calls, but overall, I really liked the play calling, and this is what we've been calling for all season long, was just simplify the playbook. Stop throwing in the RPOs if that's where we're struggling. Stop throwing in really any kind of option if that's where we're struggling. Don't put in these complicated routes for a quarterback to go through progressions. Just find a simple progression to go through, and I feel like that's what they did a lot of yesterday. And Joe John Finley, Kevin Johns, I'm not sure how much they worked together on it. I'm sure they worked together quite a bit. Joe John Finley is the one that we're going to call out for it, and I think he did a very good job of play calling yesterday. I think overall, like I said, there was really only 3 plays that I can think of that I didn't like the play call, and really only one of them I can really criticize the play call, and that being that 4th down and goal. So, play calling, that's one thing that we've got to be excited about, the fact that, hey, it looks like we've got something working, and even if Joe John Finley's not our offensive coordinator going into next season, which I'm okay with that, I do want to get a new face in there. I do want to get some new life in there. I do want to get somebody that's going to come with this with a completely new perspective, and whoever that might be. If we keep Joe John Finley around, at least we can feel confident that, hey, he's going to be able to contribute and help build up this team. And he's obviously done a very good job with being more one-on-one with these players. And Kevin Johns, too. I saw Kevin Johns over there on the sideline with Jackson Arnold and talking with him directly and kind of going through some things with him. And so that's some things that I saw that I really liked out of this team. Now, does it mean a whole lot now that we've got 4 losses and we've only got 4 wins and we've got, 4 more, really 3 more tough games and 1 more that we feel like we should be able to win regardless of how we play? No, maybe the rest of the season is worth just shutting off the TV to some of you. But like I said, I'm a fan of this team. I'm a diehard fan. And many of you, if you're watching this right now, you're a fan of the team as well. And you're going to keep on finishing it out and finishing out the season. We're not going to be sore losers and just abandon our team just because they lost 1 season. Now, we hope that we can build something going into next season. That's what we have to cheer for at this point. I mean, there's not a whole lot to cheer for this season, but we can try to build upon something to lean into next season. Maybe get some of these players that we know that are coming back to kind of progress. Another final thought, one of the final thoughts I had is that I felt like overall there was a lot of players, specific players that played very hard, and I think as a team overall, specifically in the first half, the second half, I really don't know what happened. Just team morale went down when the offensive line crumbled, and that's ultimately what happened. The offense would have been able to move the ball so much better if the offensive line played the way that they did in the first half. And you know what? You can push the blame on whoever you want to blame. I really don't know where to push the blame with the offensive line. I'm very knowledgeable when it comes to the game of football. The offensive line is the one area that I know nothing of. I mean, you can see me. I'm a pretty small guy. I played, wide receiver, DB. That was the main part of where I played. I studied a lot of quarterback, never got to play too much of it, but wide receiver and DB is where I played most of my time, and so that's the parts that I know the best. And of course, around those areas, really any skill position, I think I can tell you a lot. Even on the defensive side of the ball, I can tell you a lot. Offensive line is the one area I can't tell you too much. I don't know too much about it. I've heard a lot about it, about the schemes, the different ways that they shift, and I understand that part of it, but I don't understand exactly what it is that causes offensive linemen to get beat the way that they did yesterday, specifically that left side of the line. And it was constant too. And like I said, first half with Jacob Sexton healthy and still in there, it seemed like they were doing just fine, and then we switched it up because he wasn't healthy. He went down with the injury, and that hurt us. The defense looked really good. First half, again, I can't be more proud of the way that they played the first half. But then, you look at that second half, that's where we just really got roasted. Like I said, only 43 rushing yards in the first half. They had 69 total rushing yards. So, I mean, that run defense was stout. They were able to penetrate into the backfield. They were flooding to the ball. We saw that on the 4th down play where they came out and they stopped him behind the line. There was even another one where, man, I thought that big boy that they had running the ball, he's a defensive player, and he was running the ball, and I thought they had him down, and I saw the knee down, and then they showed a different angle, and the knee wasn't actually down yet, and so he barely picked up the first down. It's little things like that, it hurt. We did force them to 5 of 13 on third down conversions. I can't remember exactly what it was in the first half, but I know we did a pretty good job on third downs. And on fourth down, shut them down both times that they truly went for it on fourth down. There was a couple of other times where I feel like maybe the defensive scheme, the defensive layout caused them to hold back. I don't know if they were just trying to draw us offside or if it was, hey, let's try to draw them offside. Wait, but we're still gonna run this play. And then they looked around and didn't like the way that their offense was schemed up against the defense that we set out there on the field. That's kind of the way it felt to me. And so I feel like we did a really good job overall on fourth down, and then disciplined too on the defensive side of the ball, not to jump when they were trying that. There were some key penalties and key moments that it really hurt. And then, there was the one too where the sideline warning, and I saw a replay of that. I've seen much less penalized, and so that was one that, man, I really was hoping was going to get called our way. But also earlier in the game, we had a roughing the passer that I did not think was roughing the passer. And I saw a lot of people throwing a fit about the targeting. That should have been targeting. I don't think it should have been. I really don't. I thought it was a good tackle. I thought Peyton Bowen called a fair catch. That was my gripe with that. Apparently he didn't. Anyways, more takeaways. I mean, Kenai Walker and Des Malone, there was literally one play where they had a big chunk play, and I said, what is Des Malone doing backing, or squeezing up into coverage so tight on this play? And the way that they're lined up, it just felt so wrong that he was squeezing up. And sure enough, as soon as I said that, they snap the ball and they go right to the receiver on that side of the field, right over Des Malone's head. He was lost in coverage. Des Malone, I haven't seen a whole lot of great from him other than being able to tackle. Maybe on those screen plays, I think we might have been able to see that a couple of times and flooding to the ball on those. And then Kenai Walker just constantly getting beat over top. There was actually one play that I was very proud of him for keeping with his receiver and saving a touchdown pass. But there were several others. There was the one that was a touchdown and then overturned because he was just barely short. And I think then right after that, I think is whenever they went for it, got the touchdown. The very next play, it was reviewed again. I think that was the one where I thought that maybe his knee was down. But anyways, Kenai Walker and, I feel like Kenai Walker and Des Malone are two guys that I want to call out on the defensive side of the ball, that at that corner position, they kept on missing assignments, and they kept on not necessarily missing assignments, but just getting beat. And that's something that can't happen on that defensive side of the ball. That's the one area that makes this defense go from good to elite, is if we can have better play there. I feel like Eli Bowen being a freshman, that's a bright spot that we can look forward and know that he's going to be playing really well for us. I didn't actually hear anything. I was waiting to hear back about Peyton Bowen. I know that he went off the field. I don't know that I saw him return to the field. I know that he got shaken up pretty bad whenever he got hit on that punt return that they thought might have been a targeting that got overturned. Anyways, that's one thing that I want to look into. But anyways, as far as the DBs, I also felt like Billy Bowman wasn't in the right position a lot of times where he could have made a play and didn't quite get there. So, there's a lot of areas in that secondary that it just felt like it was just not good enough. The front seven, the first two levels there, that defensive line and the linebackers have been stout all season long, and they were stout all the way through this game. Like I said, only allowing 69 yards on the ground was great, and the pressure kept on getting there, and hats off to Jackson Dart. That was one area that I said we have to get pressure to Jackson Dart, and he's going to force a ball somewhere where he shouldn't, and all game long he didn't. We had a lot of pressure on him constantly, and a lot of times he found a way around the defense. He found a way out of the pocket to create a better play or take off with his legs, and I've got to give it to Jackson Dart. He played a phenomenal game, and I guess I could pull up his stats real quick just to kind of look at him. He went 22 of 30. Just a crazy good game. 311 yards through the air. That was a majority of their offense. I mean, they only had 380 yards total offense. He was, explosive play after explosive play, too, because it was over 10-yard average for him through the air. So just phenomenal game from him. I really want to shout out Jackson Dart, a guy that, Oklahoma thought they might be able to pick up before we ended up getting Dylan Gabriel, and he went to Ole Miss. But, I'm very happy for him. He had a very good very good game overall. But yeah, I just felt like all the pressure that we got to him, it got back there on Jackson Dart. He was able to make good plays, got out of the pocket, extended plays, was able to find players downfield, threw it to an open receiver rather than trying to squeeze it to a tight spot, and and a couple of times just went down, took a sack rather than being risky with the ball. So it was just one of those cat and mouse games that we just couldn't quite win. Another one. I felt like it may not have changed anything. It may not have changed anything at all because the offensive line was atrocious. We saw that where we had 3 sacks in a row there towards the end of the game, and Jackson Arnold just could not get anything going because of that left side of the offensive line just imploding on him time and time again. But I did feel like the timeout management there towards the end of the game was poor. When we had that 4th down, I felt like, hey, why not? Let's go for the 4th down. You don't really have much to lose here. Go for it on 4th down. And they second thought it. They took a second guess and they didn't want to go for it. They ended up calling a timeout. We wasted 1 timeout there, and then there was the 3rd timeout. I thought was bad placement for when we took it. But I don't know that would have changed much about the game. And I felt like we weren't pressing the ball down the field often enough when it mattered the most, when we really needed to. There was another time I know that we tried to air the ball out, and it was questionable whether it was pass interference or not. It was definitely questionable. I felt like I think it was Brendan Thompson. I can't remember if it was Brendan Thompson or J.J. Hester down the field trying to cut back in, and the DB kept on pushing them out. That felt... that was like the only one long bomb that I can think of throughout the entire game. I don't know why we don't air it out, because that's the one thing that we have in receiver. We don't have receivers that are going to come across the middle and break open in the middle of the field. We don't have receivers that are shifty. Outside of Jacob Jordan, we don't have those wide receivers like a Drake Stoops, or even like a Jaleel Farouk. And what he can do. Nick Anderson can do the same, some sure hands across the middle of the field. But what we do have is guys that can break the top off the defense, and we didn't try going there earlier in the game when I felt like that really could have been a breaking point for us. You've got guys like Zion Reagans, who we know is fast. We got guys like Zion Kearney, who we know is really fast. We've got guys like Brendan Thompson and even J.J. Hester. I feel like J.J. Hester has had just kind of a bug all season long where he just hasn't been able to make big catches. But yeah, I mean, nobody is going to be able to succeed with the injury report that we've had all season long, specifically in the wide receiver room. Nobody's going to be able to succeed when you've got your top 5 wide receivers, not just 5 wide receivers randomly sprinkled through. You've got a couple of guys that would normally be able to give you depth and they're not in the game. When you don't have your top 5 wide receivers, it's going to be tough to win games. And Sooner Nation, this is more for you, because I know a lot of outside noise will be making fun of us for using this as an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's a reason why we didn't perform very well this season. And that reason is, with this injury report that we've had, this injury list that we've had all season long, it's going to be tough to win games. And there's certain games like the Tennessee game where, really the Tennessee game was the first one we felt like we had a healthy offensive line, and we got beat up right away. And, then going forward, there was other games, like Tulane. There was other games, specifically, with the losses. You look at the way that we played against Texas. You look at, again, the way that we played against South Carolina, just not being able to find. There was a lot of dropped passes against South Carolina, and that all comes down to the wide receivers that are going to be able to make plays for you. And so, although the offensive line was more of an issue than I think a lot of us were hoping, I kept on telling everybody preseason, don't worry about the offensive line. Coach Biedenbow is a great offensive line coach, and I still believe that to be true. But this season definitely was just not a testimony of that. I feel like a lot of media personnel for the Oklahoma Sooners kept on talking about how this offensive line will find its rhythm before the season starts. This offensive line will find a way to come out and find a way to gel by the time we get into SEC play, and that wasn't the case. The biggest problem all season long, and specifically in these last 2 games, has been the offensive line. I saw a lot of numbers back and forth exactly on how many sacks we allowed. I see the number was changed to 10, so we let up 19 sacks in the last 2 games. That goes on the offensive line, because a lot of those sacks, most of those sacks, earlier on in the season when I said there was some sacks that I don't blame on the offensive line, there were some sacks taken that I felt like Jackson Arnold and even Michael Hawkins put themselves into those situations where they tried running out of the pocket too quick. They had happy feet and got themselves into a bad situation. In these last 2 games, I can't blame the quarterback one bit, really both of them, because I feel like Michael Hawkins, for the short time that he was in against South Carolina, even he had struggles with that offensive line, letting in on the left side, letting in on through the middle. That seems to be our Achilles heel, and that's ultimately why we lost these last 2 games, is that offensive line just could not hold up. The offensive line could not push forward and give a break to the quarterback. And that's been the biggest issue. And I think ultimately, I think earlier on in the season, I think when you consider that Tennessee game and when you go over to the Texas game, I think a lot of that, I say, was play calling. A lot of those 2 games, I think, were play calling. Against South Carolina, I didn't hate the play calling against South Carolina so much, but it was a lot of execution. I did think I didn't like the fact that we had a young quarterback in, a starting quarterback ever. But I definitely didn't like having Michael Hawkins in at quarterback after he threw not just 1 interception, but then a second turnover. Yeah, I mean it's something that you've got to change. But overall, the play calling in these last 2 games was not the problem, and specifically in this game, it was not the problem. And going forward, I think we have a tough road ahead of us, because we're not going to win very many more games. We've got one for sure win against Maine. we can be happy about that. Next week we can celebrate a win. I don't know how much you guys will be celebrating. That's not going to feel like much of a celebration. But that gets us to 5 wins. Now where's that 6th one? Is it going to be Bama? I mean, as down of a year as it's been for Bama, I don't see that happening. Not anymore. Not the way that this team has been performing. Is it going to be LSU? I don't think so. Mizzou is the only one that I think is a possibility to get to that 6th win. My hope was that, hey, if you can pull off a win against Ole Miss yesterday, which looked like they could have done in the first half, if you could pull off that win against Ole Miss, you're not sitting there at 5 wins with a 6th win in the bag against Maine, and then you could beat Mizzou for a 7th win. If you're able to do that and put on that little bit of a winning streak, and that fashion, just to be able to beat Ole Miss, Maine, and Mizzou, now you're up to 7 wins. If you're able to pull off an upset to either Alabama or LSU at that point, then you're feeling really good about an 8-win season, the way that it all fell down. If that was the case, even a 7-win season would have felt like, hey, we've got a win here, just because of where we were at throughout this season. Because the South Carolina game should not have been a loss. It should not have been a loss. And then the way that we lost to Texas should not have gone down that way. I'm going to jump to the comments real quick, just because I see we've got at least Furry Marie, our resident Roll Tide fan. OU losing like this in the first SEC season due to injuries and scheme could be seen as a good thing. The way OU fans can really see what it takes and not have an unrealistic expectations. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I don't think the majority of true Oklahoma fans had unrealistic expectations. I think you had a lot of those trash-talking OU fans. I do. I think you had a lot of them that said, we're going to come in here and we're going to run the table. I think most were like me, where 8 and 9 wins seemed like that's about where we feel like that we should be. Because, you look back, and without the injuries, without the, like you said, the scheme, I mean, the offensive play calling, I think everyone can agree, for the first 7 weeks was just atrocious. It was terrible. Terrible play calling, terrible execution, terrible coaching, ultimately. And you can look at that and realize that was a big part of it. A big part of the loss against Tennessee was because of play calling and turnovers, obviously. But that's, again, a lot of those turnovers comes from the coaching aspect. I think with Jackson Arnold, I think you're not coaching him up in those situations. There was the one turnover I know for sure where he passed it and it was behind the line. It was a backwards pass, and that turned into a fumble. That was not supposed to have happened. That he should have never thrown it in that direction at all. And so that, again, that's a lot of coaching to me, where you just tell him in that situation, this is not an option. You make sure that he understands that, especially with the in-helmet communication, make sure that he understands that before going there. So the Tennessee game, the South Carolina game was 100% just, again, the turnovers, killing yourself, and the injuries definitely do hurt you in that game with not having wide receivers to go to. You've got an offensive line that keeps on imploding, and again, because of injuries, right? And then the Texas game, that one I totally put on coaching. For the most part, I don't think we would have won that game, but that's definitely a much closer game if you put together a better play calling, a play scheme. And then I also see that Ferry Marie says a lot of trash talking fans, even RJ Young was popping cash money. Yeah, no, and I personally, I like RJ. I do. I think he's a cool dude, but I'm right there with you. I think he gets a little too high on the Sooners. And you know what? He's a fan. And I really can't blame any fan for having higher expectations out of their team. I had higher expectations out of this team, but my expectations for that 8 or 9 win season this season, for me, that 8 or 9 win season was with a healthy wide receiver core, because everyone looked at Oklahoma's wide receiver core and said, dang, that could be a really good wide receiver core. But that's something that you didn't have that. That's something that you looked at in the beginning of the season and said that wide receiver core is dangerous, and then all of a sudden by the third game, you're out your top 5 wide receivers for the rest of the season. That's something that I don't think anyone was looking forward to. I don't think anyone projected that. I think even with some of those wide receivers, like not Jalil Farouk, but with Nick Anderson and Deion Burks at the very least, thinking that at least those two might be able to make their return. Even Andrel Anthony, we thought would be able to make a return throughout some time in the season, and they never made a return. So now you're relying on a bunch of freshmen who are trying to play not at just a big level in the Big 12 sense, but at the highest level over in the SEC against those kinds of defenses. You just really can't expect that. And then Ferry Murray says, ball security in general with OU made me feel some type of way as a football fan. Can't coach that. Felt like a lack of effort and belief. Yeah, I mean, it did feel like a lack of effort, and I totally agree with you there. The ball control, specifically in these last 2 games, because the first one, the reason why I put that on coaching. So first off, going back to the Jackson Arnold one that I talked about before, the interception that he threw, that's not coaching, not at all. That's just on Jackson Arnold making the wrong read, and that was just bad play calling, or bad play execution. So that's something to throw out there. The fumble down on the 5-yard line from Jackson Arnold, that's on him too. The one behind the line of scrimmage, the one where he passed the ball and it went behind the line of scrimmage, that's where I consider that one a little more coaching, even though it's still all on Jackson Arnold. The turnover itself is on Jackson Arnold. That one is because your coaching staff did not relay to him, hey, this is your option. You do not go anywhere else outside of that. And he went to an option that wasn't even there. And that's something that does go a little bit back on coaching. Now jumping forward to Michael Hawkins, and we'll start off with, I believe he had a fumble against Texas. That one definitely is just ball control. You've got to be able to hold on to the ball better. And again, that's a freshman that shouldn't be playing in these circumstances. And then you go forward to South Carolina, where I didn't think he played well enough against Auburn or Texas to still have the starting position, to be the starter for that game. And he comes in and he's still the starter against South Carolina. And I don't know if that was the coaching staff thinking, hey, we need to allow Jackson Arnold to try to redshirt if we can, and so they're just trying to play him regardless. And then he throws the first play was a pick. It was a bad play call, because you don't pass the ball on the first play of the game when you're down and out the way that you are. I don't believe in that. I believe first downs are meant for running plays, with some exceptions, right? Because you can't run every first down, or else they're going to catch on to it eventually. But, then the very next drive, you go out there, and I believe that's whenever he let up the scoop and score and then a pick 6. I might have that reversed around, but still, yeah, that's a lot of that I do blame on coaching for that, because you shouldn't have had him in there for the second one, in my opinion. And then you definitely shouldn't have had him in there for the third one. That's 21-0 that you go down right off the bat. And one thing too, Ferry Marie, want to shout out your Crimson Tide. They're looking better. They're looking good still. And I like the way that they performed yesterday against Mizzou. That was a pretty tough show out. One more comment from Ferry Marie says, and to be fair, if OU had a few of those wide receivers, the games could have gone a completely different way. How powerful would it have been to see OU's defense get adequate rest between drives? Yeah, and you're totally right. I think the games could have gone a completely different direction. I don't know that we would have been sitting in a different win column necessarily. I think going back, I think the Tennessee game was one that, man, like that feels like we beat ourselves in many ways because of the turnovers. And then, the Texas game felt like, I feel like if we had those wide receivers in, the game could have been different, although I don't know that we won that game because Texas is just better than I think even I expected them to be this year. And then going forward again to the South Carolina game, that's one where those wide receivers being in would have helped Jackson Arnold because you saw how he played. He played better against South Carolina. And then going to Ole Miss here now, again, going back to South Carolina, Jackson Arnold had some beautiful throws that were just dropped by these young wide receivers, and there's no excuse for that. Now going forward here to Ole Miss, again, some dropped passes in key moments, and then you've also just got certain areas where you want to go deep and you just can't. There was one where Jackson Arnold was looking deep, and the young wide receivers just weren't making the cuts. They weren't getting the separation that they needed. And, he couldn't go deep, and he was doing a really good job of checking it down when he needed to. But, ultimately, I mean, yeah, that's kind of where that comes into play, with the wide receiver depth. And I do think that this Ole Miss game with the wide receivers being in the game, it could have definitely gone the other way where we could have won that game. We should have won that game. There's no reason, honestly, the defense giving up the way that they did. But then again, to your point, you've got to get the defense some adequate rest between drives, like you said. And a big part of that could have been if Oklahoma's receivers were in that game and performing a little better. So definitely could have gone a different way. I don't know that we would have won really any of those 4 games that we lost. I feel like if Jackson Arnold started that South Carolina game, I feel like we won that game. That's how I feel about that. And that, to me, is coaching. The coaches should have seen that. The coaches should have seen that Michael Hawkins didn't have what it takes to win in the last 2 games against Texas, and really Auburn didn't do well enough. It's just the defense bailed you out on a big drive. So I didn't think he performed well against Auburn. That was his first start. You kind of shake that one off. He goes to Texas. Sure, I guess I can understand where they're sticking with him now. He didn't perform well at all, and honestly, I think that he should have been pulled after the first half against Texas, and who knows, maybe that gives us a little bit of life back on offense. I really don't know how that would have gone. It's hard to say, and it's hard to speculate. But then against South Carolina, it should have never taken the first snap against South Carolina, and I think we win if Jackson Arnold was in that game. So, and then now against Ole Miss, again, I think Ole Miss is one of those where maybe if you had the healthy wide receiver core and the healthy offensive line, this would have been better. But again, you've got to be able to scheme around those injuries. You've got to be able to plan around those. You've got to be able to have the play calling going in. Ultimately, the defense can't let up 311 yards passing against Jackson Dart. Yeah, you've got to create a closer gap between you and the wide receivers. But that's all we got, Sooner Nation. Let's hang in there. You know what? We've got 4 more games to cheer these guys on. Regardless, whether they win or lose, we've got to be here. We've got to keep on supporting. We've got to be here for each other. I think this upcoming week, I'm hoping to dive into getting into the basketball because basketball season's coming up. I also want to talk a little bit about the softball team because we love our softball here at Oklahoma. And it's not to deflect completely away from football. We're still going to talk some football this upcoming week as well. We've got a big time game where we can have our last win of the season against the Maine Black Bears. But all jokes aside, we are still going to talk some college football, and we're still going to be excited about what we've got going forward and hope that we've got something better. Again, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you have hit that subscribe button, please share this on social media, share it with a friend, something of the sort to help us keep on growing. You can check out everything we do at Soonerspotlight.com. Check out our merch store over there, and you can help support this show directly. Let's keep on growing together. Sooner Nation, thank you all so much for tuning in, and Roll Tide to our local Tide fan as well, and Furry Marie. Not going to hate on the Tide just yet. We've got a few more weeks before that. But thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.